What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be kind of my closing thoughts plus dream offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's going to be the last of the Eagles videos for a little bit. Usually we get like 1 to 2 Eagles videos a week, but unfortunately, the season is over. Just a quick other preview. Tomorrow should be the offensive starters debut for the replacements. We will get back to streaming this week. My computer's back up and running to almost 100%. So stream will be this week at some point. It'll be pink slips, so make sure you stay tuned to Twitter. The Eagles season is done. So what I want to do in this video is kind of revisit last night's game, how I feel about it. We'll do a quick recap of the whole season, reminisce of the ups and the downs, and then we're going to finish just with a quick kind of Cliff Note-y version of my dream offseason. Now, this is something that is somewhat in the realm of reality, but ultimately I'm going for best case scenario. Philly can have the perfect offseason. Maybe what would it look like from my opinion. So quickly reflecting on last night, the Saints were the better team. They targeted our 10th corner. The Eagles beat reporter said Josh Hawkins, who gave up the touchdown in the back of the end zone pretty easily to, I think it was the Keith Kirkwood. And he ended up giving up, I think, 2 big third down conversions on that like 200-yard goddamn drive the Saints have in the third quarter. He's our 10th corner, and when he was trying to cover and go up against Drew Brees, and it's one of those things where if the tables were turned, Saint fans would be complaining like, oh yeah, if Marshawn Lattimore was in there and not our 10th corner, we probably would have won the game. So I think it's definitely right for Philadelphia. Philly is the right. Philly fans around the world have the right to complain about that game because when we were fully healthy. Asterisk, when we were as healthy as we could have been going into this game, still from an injury standpoint, way worse than the New Orleans Saints, we were dominating. And then once Brandon Brooks went down with a torn Achilles, I think the Saints actually lost Sheldon Rankins, their starting D tackles, with a torn Achilles. But once Brandon Brooks went down, and then Fletcher Cox played, it literally felt like he was playing 50% of his regular snaps. We missed Michael Bennett. We missed Brandon Graham for extended periods of time. Starting corner Rasul Douglas. Avonte Maddox went down a little bit. It was just, and you found out Alshon Jeffrey's playing with broken ribs. So we were, you just feel like if we were healthy, that interception that Nick Foles had at the end wouldn't have mattered because that game would have been over at halftime. We would have had more than 14 points. We wouldn't have stalled. But at the end of the day, the Saints played who the Eagles had to put out there, and they were able to win. And that's kind of how you have to just suck it up and say, well, if we didn't win the Super Bowl last year, I would be uber salty right now and just saying the Saints suck. They're overrated, and it took all of our guys to get hurt, and then a ridiculous drop pass for them to beat us, the number 1 team, to beat the number 6 seed that's injury prone. But the Super Bowl last year just makes me realize that this year we thought it was done. We thought this season was over, and they made a run out of it. They gave us much more than what we probably should have got this year. And, hats off to the Saints. Now, I will say, after the victory, they went to the Saints locker room and they were getting hype to Dreams and Nightmares by Meek Mill, which was the song that the Philadelphia Eagles came out to at the Super Bowl, kind of the song of the Super Bowl run. Incredibly douchebag thing to do. I don't know why Saints aren't trying to do their own thing. Maybe they're a little upset about the ski mask thing, but I said at the end of the video I was pulling for the Saints to win. But with that little stunt, that little Dreams and Nightmares stunt, acting like a bunch of douchebags, I'm probably now 50-50 between them and the Rams. It's really ultimately anybody but the New England Patriots. But because that little Meek Mill trying to be douchebags about the Philadelphia Eagles, give me the Rams. Give me 51-49 is now my favoritism for that Rams Saints game. So that was last night. It's over. Obviously, the bad news is Brandon Brooks. He had torn Achilles. It looks like he personally said during the presser 6 to 8 months is the recovery time. So that puts him right around the beginning of the season. Shouldn't miss much time, and that slightly changes how we'll probably address the cap with Wiz. They'll probably hang on to Wiz for a little bit, which is not crazy because you clearly get rid of Chance Warmack. That's roughly Wiz's contract anyway. But we might have saw the last game from last night. Nick Foles. I made a tweet last night. Nick Foles is, in my opinion, the most legendary quarterback the Philadelphia Eagles ever have. We all can hope that Carson Wentz can supplant that and surpass that and become the best. But as of right now, I think Nick Foles has to be at the number 1 spot. And while you'd hope that somehow, some way, Philly can get something for him, like we tag him for $20 million and can move him to a team that doesn't want to risk him hitting free agency and getting a bidding more like that, I mean, that could happen, but I mean, that's still, if they do that, that's still $20 million on Philadelphia's books until they move them. That could drastically hinder how they want to approach free agency in this offseason. So there's a chance. I think literally it's 50-50 that they either do something like that and try to get value, or they just let him walk. And all I know is that whatever team Nick Foles could go to the goddamn Dallas Cowboys. It's not going to happen. They probably should. He's a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, but Nick Foles could go to the Dallas Cowboys, and as long as they're not playing us, I would still be a Nick Foles fan. I would still cheer for him. So whatever team Nick Foles goes to, within reason, I'll probably cheer for that team. But regardless, I'll always be a fan of Nick Foles, and it's awesome, man. It was an honor. It was an honor watching him. And then, that he's not the only one. There's Jason Peters. Jason Peters could be gone. I think he's the greatest tackle we've ever had. I think he's a future Hall of Famer. Maybe Nick Foles is probably a future Hall of Famer, to be honest with you, but when you look at Jason Peters, it could be his last game. There hasn't been a lot of murmurs about him retiring yet, but you have to assume that is a very, very real possibility. So, obviously I'd like to see him come back for one more year, get 100% healthy, and make it so it's not an absolute must that we draft a tackle in the first round, because we can't. Big V is not ready to take over there, and I don't think Jordan Mailata is either. It could be the last time we see him. Could be the last time we see Jason Kelsey. He said he's taking it year by year. I highly doubt that he will, but there's a chance. Darren Sproles, another one. He could be gone, even though it looks like we're going to try and bring him back for one more year if he wants to play. You got Brandon Graham, big-time contract. There's a rumor that he will take a slight hometown discount to remain with the Eagles, but it's probably his last opportunity at a big contract. I wouldn't fault him for going away, and honestly, he's currently at an $8 million cap hit. I don't think he's worth much more than that. I would definitely cap him at 10, but according to market value and stuff like that, he could get 13 to 14, and that's far too much for me. And I thought it was a little bit weird that he was the 6th team captain last night. Maybe they did that because they thought it was his last game. Jordan Hicks, could be Jordan Hicks' last game. It's going to be a different team next year, man, and a lot of good players, a lot of players that were very, very important for our Super Bowl run, a lot of fan favorites. This could have been the last game we saw them in Philadelphia Eagles green, and I feel like while it's not the result we wanted, if we stayed healthy, we could have probably kept this thing running, but the fight that team showed with the injuries that they suffered, with going up against completely healthy teams, it's awesome, man. You can't help but admire them, you can't help but respect them, and you can't help but just, this season makes me love this team more. Then it makes no difference, because if we would have went on and played the Rams, we probably wouldn't have had Fletcher Cox. We probably wouldn't have Nigel Bradham. Both those guys were in boots. Maybe not Alshon Jeffrey with the ribs. Brandon Brooks is gone. We would be limping badly into that Rams game if we were able to survive and beat the Saints. And you look at the Rams; they're fully healthy. So, either way, I'm super, super proud of this team. But maybe you can credit it to, we had a lot of injuries the last time we played the Saints, that turf field. If this was a home game, if we did the job during the regular season, maybe we wouldn't have to go to that stupid turf field. We would be able to play at the link, and maybe these injuries would be somewhat unavoidable. So let's kind of look back at the regular season, the ups and the downs, and then we'll get to my dream offseason. So the whole season started with, is Carson Wentz going to be ready week 1? Is he not? We found out that he wasn't, and we had to go with Nick Foles in the season opener against the Atlanta Falcons, which we were able to win 18-12. Wasn't really pretty, but we saw, Nick Foles be okay enough. But ultimately, we saw Jai just feast. We thought we had a run game for sure. This run game is going to be able to help us in terms of keeping a balance until Carson Wentz is ready. And that was an excellent, excellent way to start the season. Obviously, we saw Julio Jones just feast on our secondary, which was the beginning for a cause of concern about Jim Swartz. But we got the win. We got the win, and we were super happy that our run game looked legit enough that it should be able to carry this team. And then the injuries started to happen. Week 2, we ran into the Tampa Bay Bucks, who were probably the hottest team in the league after actually beating the Saints in Week 1. We lost 27-21, and Ryan Fitzpatrick went off. Huge questions to our defense, our secondary with Jim Swartz. And, of course, this was the beginning of the end for Jai, the guy that essentially was the most important player in winning that Week 1 game against the Falcons. This was pretty much the beginning of the end of the season. I think it was like an ACL tear he got. So this was the beginning of, we do not have a running back. We are going to struggle to run the ball because Darren Sproles is hurt. He's banged up. So, good God, this Donnell Pumphrey pick from 2 years ago that's absolute bust is coming back to haunt us. So then we went into week 3, sitting at 1-1, and it was the return of Carson Wentz coming back a couple weeks early. Some people thought he might be back week 5, week 4, but coming back week 3, we're able to beat a playoff caliber team, a playoff team in the Indianapolis Colts 20-16. In this game, Carson Wentz played pretty well. He's, we're knocking the rust off a little bit, but this was, I firmly believe, a preview of what we're going to see down the stretch next year for the Philadelphia Eagles, because in this game, Zach Ertz had 73 yards, Dallas Goedert had 73 yards and a touchdown. I think it's going to be paramount for this Philadelphia Eagles offense next year to find a way to have Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert on the field at least 60% of the time. It is too lethal. Dallas Goedert is too good, and Zach Ertz is too good not to have them on the field. And I feel like if you knew that, you drafted Dallas Goedert with the highest pick last season, find a way to use them both, because or else it's a waste. If you're only going to run one tight end on the field, why did you make that much of an investment in a tight end? So we got the job done there. Then in week 4, we had I still think it might be the toughest loss of the season emotionally, but we had the 26-23 defeat against the Tennessee Titans, where we just, in overtime, that was the beginning of the picket fence defense. We saw, Corey Graham just make the worst decision all time, and how many, like 3rd and 10 plus and 4th and 10 plus were the Titans able to convert in that game? That was definitely a game we did not deserve to lose, but we did. And that was kind of the first game where I'm going like, this could be a rough season. It's through 4 weeks, though. Maybe we can turn it around. Week 5, we played the Minnesota Vikings, and that was a loss, 23-21, a very close game. What I remember about this game, the most frustrating thing was, it was later in the game. We had them on 3rd down. Michael Bennett got a sack. It was going to be, Eagles ball back. And it was like one of the worst roughing the passer calls I've ever seen. Like, Michael Bennett was already on the ground, and then he tried to grab the legs of Kirk Cousins for the sack, which he did, and the ref said that was roughing the passer. It was absolutely horrendous. And that drive where Philly was getting off the field ended up in a touchdown for the Minnesota Vikings, and I believe that was the only difference maker between Philly winning and losing that game, because everything else played well. Week 6, we had the Giants. That was a 34-13 game. Saquon Barkley was a man on a mission in this game. I think he had well over 200 total yards. But this is when we knew that Philly was at the very minimum better than the Giants in the NFC East. Week 7, we had the Carolina game. We had a game that we were up 17-0 going into the 4th quarter, and then we let the Panthers get 21 straight. This was at home. This is where I was, enough is enough with Jim Schwartz in this defense. He has to be in the hot seat at this point. That was pathetic. That was the worst defensive performance I've ever seen in the second half. How can you go up from shutting them out for 3 quarters to giving up 3 touchdowns? It comes down to scheme. It comes down to coaching, and that loss there, one of the, it's either between that and the Tennessee loss is the worst loss that the Philadelphia Eagles suffered this season. Has us, we'll talk about our dream offseason, who we have returning at defensive coordinator. Week 8 in London, we had the 24-18 victory over the Jags, 2 struggling teams we both desperately needed to win, and we're able to, that was nothing. I don't think there's any huge talking point from that, but Carson Wentz played very, very well, had 3 touchdowns. Week 9 was our bye. Going into week 10, coming out of the bye, we had Dallas at home. We felt very, very comfortable about this one, and unfortunately, Dallas was able to win 27-20. It was a close game. This was a game that I don't recall the refs being particularly bad. Zach Ertz was a man on a mission. And it was just, whoever had it almost felt like in that game, whoever had the ball last was going to score. And that was for lack of a better, without diving in too much. Essentially, Dallas was able to punch it in with Zeke to win that game. And that was full credit. Dallas played better than us that game. Going to week 11, it was the Saints game where we lost 48-7. Just throw it out. I did not know half the guys in our secondary. You're going up against the best offense in the league. Bad loss. Carson Wentz's worst game of his career. Week 12, we had the Giants, which was a 25-22 victory, a little bit closer than it needed to be. This was pretty much the game. It was like, well, it's a bounce back from that Saints slaughtering. We'll take it. It's a divisional win. Week 13, we had the Monday night game against the Washington Redskins, 28-13. Crucial, big-time win for us, bouncing back from that Cowboy loss in terms of the NFC East. And we knew week 14, we had the Dallas Cowboys. We had a chance to become first once again in the NFC East. And then that Cowboys game was the overtime loss, 29-23, and that was firmly a game that the refs screwed us. The refs on the opening play of the game, Kamu Grugier-Hill forced a fumble. We recovered the fumble. It was like on their 5-yard line, clear recovery, and they let the ball stay with the Dallas Cowboys. We had multiple horrible calls in that game. They had like a 70-yard Dallas Goedert touchdown that got called back for offensive pass interference. that was a game that we, on one hand, Dallas played well. They controlled the clock in overtime. Our defense couldn't get out the field. Obviously, Amari Cooper went off, and then we had the bullshit, unlucky Rasul Douglas went for the pass breakup, and it fell into Amari Cooper's hands. But that was a game that shouldn't have been over way before that. The refs consistently kept the Cowboys in that game. And, I actually think now looking back, that game was an important loss for us because, that's the difference between Philly playing the Bears in the first round of the playoffs or the Seahawks in the first round of the playoffs. Give me the Bears over the Seahawks for the Eagles. So kind of helped us out, I think. Going to Week 15, we had the beginning of the Nick Foles era. Carson Wentz had the back injury flare-up, so we went in with Nick Foles against the Rams, and pretty much everyone's saying we're either going to get slaughtered or this is going to be that Nick Foles magic game, and it was. Nick Foles played pretty well, but the biggest thing about this game was the way the defense stood up and was able to not choke it at the end. 30-23 victory for your Eagles. Week 16, we had the Texans again. Uber tough matchup against a playoff team in the Houston Texans. We were able to win that one 32-30. Nick Foles, 471 yards, 4 touchdowns on the day. It was it. This happened. We're like, we're going to go to the playoffs. We're going to make the playoffs. Everyone started to believe at this point. And then week 17, beat the Washington Redskins 24-0. Nick Foles tied the game record for most completions in a row. I think it was 25. And obviously, everyone was watching that game between the Vikings and the Bears, and the Bears were able to win, and that got us into the playoffs. That was just, all right, here we go. Nick Foles, the run is continuing. Chicago, you just sealed your own fate because now you're taking on the hottest quarterback entering the playoffs. And then we had the wild card where we beat the Bears 16-15 in a game that, it was the miss. Everyone will talk about the missed Cody Parkey field goal, but I mean, if you're a Bears fan, offense did nothing. This was the Philadelphia Eagles defense dominating at the line of scrimmage. Cody Parkey got more points than your offense, but ultimately it would be the double doink that is talked about as Philly was like, all right, we got the win. No one gave us a chance whatsoever. We are the final seed, and we're going up against the best defense in the league, the number 2 seed in the NFC, and we're still able to win. Then we went to the divisional round, which is last night's game against the Saints, where we started out incredibly hot, 14-0, forced fumbles, turnovers, and then our team started to drop like flies, and that let the Saints get back in the game. And even then, even though the Saints got back in the game, they absolutely dominated the game from halfway the second quarter all the way to the fourth quarter. We still were a 1 in a million drop for Alshon Jeffrey away from probably winning that game. So the fact that, all the injuries, the ups and downs of the season, most of us thought the year was over in that overtime loss against Dallas, that we're able to make it this exciting. You kind of got to throw some credit to this Philadelphia Eagles team. And again, I already talked about it. Very, very proud of the squad. I don't think if we're able to survive this game with Fletcher Cox in a walking boot, Nigel Bradham in a walking boot, Brandon Brooks done with a torn Achilles, Alshon Jeffrey would have probably been 50-50 game time decision. It would have been even too much for Nick Foles' magic, I think, next week to have expectations with those injuries that we could compete with the Rams or, hell, go on and win the Super Bowl. But still, I'll never forget some of the moments from this season, some of the moments from this stretch. And to cap off the year, it's not the way we would have wanted to end, but I have no complaints. So that being said, we got to talk about the offseason. Quick, I'm going to give you 5 dream moves that would happen in this offseason for me, for the Philadelphia Eagles. So when you look at the roster here, so I kind of did I'm going to do a much more in-depth video, do a full mock offseason later, but I just feel like we should talk about it now a little bit for the Philadelphia Eagles. So under the assumption that Jay Ajayi is not coming back, under the assumption that Jason Peters is going to retire, under the assumption that Chris Long is going to retire, under the assumption that Brandon Graham is going to hit the market and cash out for his final big contract because we're not going to be able to pay it, on the assumption that Ronald Darby, I'm just pretty much listing off all their big free agents, is going to hit the open market and not get a 1-year prove-it deal. Does he even get one? With Devontae Maddox playing very, very well. How our roster shapes up, I mean, we got a couple spots here. I currently have us needing another tight end, another wide receiver, 3 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, 2 ends and a D tackle, a middle linebacker, 2 corners, and 3 safeties. Kind of looking at the last couple of final 53s for the Eagles. That's roughly what the shape of our roster looks like every year. So those are all free spots. And I was trying to think, look at available free agents. What free agents could work within our budget? So obviously I want to start by saying Jason Peters, if he wants to come back on a cheap deal to try to make one last run As long as it's team friendly, I would look at him as well as Darren Sproles. Both these guys trying to get that uber veteran kind of deal because they're probably not going to get that money elsewhere. And why would they at this point in their career want to move just for the money? I would look at bringing those two guys back as well as Jordan Hicks. I think Jordan Hicks was, he's never played a full 16 games, I don't think. But I think his market is going to be slightly below value because of these injuries. And I would like to bring him back, even though there are some targets for the Philadelphia Eagles. You can look at Devin White, maybe slipping Mac Wilson from Alabama. There's some nice linebackers that could be in play in the first round, but I would probably want to look at bringing back Jordan Hicks. So those are the free agents I'm talking about. From that, what guys are going to be on the market that I would probably consider big-time targets? I think in terms of the upper echelon, I would like to look at Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, Adrian Amos from the Chicago Bears. I think for the fact that Philadelphia runs 3 safeties on the field a whole lot, getting another big-time playmaker. I think Rodney McLeod will most likely be a cap casualty. He's starting to look a step slower, and he's one of the more, I think he's the 4th or 5th highest-paid safety in the league. It's just not worth it at this point. So I think some of those big guys, I don't know if the Bears will have enough money to pay Amos. Same with the Houston Texans and Honey Badger. They would probably be my top 2 targets. You get maybe Denzel Perryman at linebacker, adding a blocking tight end to compete with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, to help for those jumbo sets. You can kind of look at Max Williams or Nick Boyle. One of those Ravens tight ends are probably going to hit the market. Wide receiver, you can look at Tyrell Williams from the Chargers. We can look at maybe a team-friendly deal by bringing J.J. back. I just really do feel like with the way the league's moving, J.J. is probably going to get all right money, and it could be just, we have 10 draft picks, just hit on a running back. Just hoping game that you can hit on one of these next just really good, really productive rookie running backs. So yeah, really, all I want to say about free agency at this point, number one, I think my dream, because this is my dream offseason, we are starting with number one, Honey Badger and free agency. I think Tyrann Mathieu he's so designed for a Jim Schwartz defense. He can play corner. He can play nickel corner. He can play safety. He also has some special team ability. The way that he plays and excels in the secondary is exactly the kind of piece that I think Jim Schwartz can use. And I don't necessarily, the safety market is been pretty cheap these last couple of years. I think it's going to be somewhat affordable. There's going to be other safeties on that market that could lower his price. Clinton Dix, Landon Collins has yet to get re-signed from the Giants. So dream move number one would be bringing in Tyrann Mathieu. Dream move number 2, we're going to talk about the draft. In the first round, there is 2 positions that I firmly believe the Philadelphia Eagles need to go. So we don't know. I'm not really willing to hedge my bet on Jordan Hicks being one of my dream moves, but I think linebacker, if Devin White's there, if for whatever reason he's slipping down teams' draft boards because maybe he doesn't have the coverage ability that a Mac Wilson, but I think Devin White and Mac Wilson, a premier linebacker, even if we bring back Jordan Hicks, the fact we can open up our playbook. I do feel like Camus been all right. I think he's good depth, can fill in. But I do feel like we're kind of hindering our playbook by not having really the comfortability to play with 3 linebackers. It's Nigel Bradham and Jordan Hicks. So having that next linebacker, absolutely. And then we also have to talk about tackle. I had Yodny Kajust, the tackle from West Virginia, going to the Eagles in the first round. Because if Jason Peters doesn't come back, even if he does, Big V is not the guy. And unless they feel that Jordan Mailata can be that guy after, maybe refining himself again this offseason, we got to go offensive line. Like Brandon Brooks could miss foreseeable time. Jason Kelce, if he's taking a year-by-year approach for his retire, offensive line, I think, is a top priority. We need to protect Carson Wentz, and one of those things. So that would be dream move number 2 is middle linebacker, just linebacker. We don't have to be middle linebacker or tackle in the first round. Dream move number 3, defensive coordinator. Now, Jim Schwartz, we had a lot of ups and downs. I give him credit for the amount of injuries that he's had. He has had some great games for the amount of injuries. But I've always had these things with Jim Schwartz that they creep their ugly head up too much, and they haven't changed, which leads me to believe that they're just the downside of having Jim Schwartz as your DC. One is I like to argue that he's not that great at developing players. His whole scheme is around the front 4 getting pressure. And it's not like he has some crazy blitzes. It's not like he has some crazy coverages. His scheme is dependent on our good players being good so that everything else works. And how many players have we seen come in and take their game to another level under Jim Schwartz? A lot more have not than they have. You could argue Nigel Bradham has played better than what he was with the Buffalo Bills. You could argue maybe we can give him credit for seeing Cravon LeBlanc and Avonte Maddox stepping up a little bit because those guys are in the mold of a ideal Jim Schwartz corner, that sub 6 feet tall, shiftier guy. But other than that, who has really stepped their game up? I've seen nothing else. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anyone. So that's, he can't make the most of our top-tier talent. I've seen a guy that's reluctant to adjust his game plan, that picket fence defense that gets burned time and time and time again, continue to ran it, and it was ultimately a downfall in a lot of crucial moments. So that being said, and he's out of contract. We don't have to fire him. We just don't have to have the decision to bring him back. And unfortunately, maybe the two top candidates, Todd Bowles and Greg Williams, in terms of who would be the big exciting hire, they're already off the market. Looking who's still out there. Maybe you got Chris Hewitt, the DB coach from the Ravens. You got, someone mentioned Rex Ryan, but Rex Ryan runs a 3-4. I don't think there's a chance in hell Philly changes their scheme. But you have Chris Hewitt, the DB coach from the Ravens. Here's mine. So I'm on this thing where I don't feel like Jim Schwartz is a terrible DC. I don't feel like, maybe if all of our players are healthy, he's going to do a much better job like he did for the first half of the year, or for most of the year last year. But I think if there's a possibility that you could get Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator from Clemson, who won yet another national championship, this would be the time that I would go in there and probe and say, hey, come to the NFL. Time for a new challenge. He has the best 4-3 defense in college football. He would be my dream hire. I would absolutely go with Brent Venables over bringing back Jim Schwartz. Here's why. Because the league now wants that Cliff Kingsbury, who got a job, the college offense. The college offense, and you have these old DCs trying to figure out a way to stop it. The college offense is becoming the new fad in the National Football League. And I think the new trend is going to be, right now everyone wants the offensive guy. I think the new trend is going to be finding what defenses can stop these college offenses. And getting a guy like Brent Venables would be like ahead of the curve. It would be a trend-setting move, I think, for the Philadelphia Eagles. So if we can't get a guy like Brent Venables, I don't really see any other alternatives right now to Jim Schwartz that I'd rather have. But that would be dream move number 3, will be getting Brent Venables, DC, from Clemson. So going on to dream move number 4, I said I'm giving you 5 of these things. Dream move number 4 is a complete revamp of our medical staff. I feel like they've been under fire, misdiagnosing things. There's big potential drama with Carson Wentz. And I just think with the absurd amount of injuries he suffered this year, something has to change. I don't know if you guys need to get back to using those Chip Kelly smoothies, but when Chip was here, our defense played an absurd amount of snaps, and we weren't seeing those injuries, even on offense. So I feel like, I think there was a report that Philly completely changed their medical staff this offseason after winning the Super Bowl, which is odd. But whatever they did this year, it got to turn around, man. It was not good at all. And then dream move number 5. You don't think I was going to talk about Mike Groh, all right? Don't forget about him. Even though they played well down the stretch, Mike Groh has not been very good. And this is dreams. Like I said, this is dream moves. So here we go. Here's the most wacky of them. I think Eagles beat reporter posted this, and I said, I've never thought about that. That is my dream move. That's what kind of got me to add this to the end of the video and turn this into a goddamn podcast. So Nick Foles is a family man. Nick Foles has been kind of saying, maybe he wants to go on top. Maybe he won't cash out. Nick Foles retires and comes back as our offensive coordinator. Perfect scenario. There's I don't even need to explain it. As soon as that, if you're an Eagle fan, as soon as that came across your earlobes, you went, yes. So there you go. That's my 5 dream moves. Number 1, look at Honey Badger and Jordan Hicks in free agency. Number 2, draft linebacker or tackle in the first round, probably more so tackle. Number 3, look at Brent Venables as DC. If not, probably going to have to bring back Jim Schwartz. Number 4 is fire the medical team. And number 5, the dreamiest of the dreams, Nick Foles. It's hypothetical. Nick Foles retires, comes back as our OC. Regardless, probably need to know OC. Mike Groh wasn't very good. So there you go, guys. That is the Eagles. That is the 2018-2019 Eagles and my mock offseason, dream offseason. It's a long one. It was a little bit of a longer video, but it's a little bit closure that I needed. I need to talk it out. And I feel better after this video about the Eagles season than I did probably before it. So what do you guys think? What is going to be your one takeaway from this season? What are you going to remember? Are you going to remember the bad losses against the Titans and the Panthers? Are you going to remember the ups of Nick Foles taking this team over? And maybe give you 3. How about this in the comments? Give me 3 of your dream scenarios this offseason, and I can kind of compare them and kind of put them in my notes for when I do my actual Eagles mock-off season once we know the full draft order, full draft prospects, and what guys are getting re-signed and what guys are going to hit the market. But thank you guys for watching. As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. We'll catch you back here tomorrow for some more replacements. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out and fly, Eagles, fly.